18 years. $50 million. And the truth was, the man Rebecca had been chasing all this time had been right there, under her nose, emptying the trash in her office every night. She could have passed him in the hallway 100 times and she probably had never realizing he was the one who pulled her out of the wreckage when she was barely 18 and bleeding under twisted steel. Yeah, that happened, and it's the kind of thing that messes with your head once you know. Rebecca Callahan wasn't the kind of woman people ignored. CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, platinum hair pulled tight, eyes blue eyes sharp enough to slice a boardroom in half. 36 floors up, she ruled over the city like it was her personal chessboard, every move calculated, every piece under control, except the ghost of the man who had saved her life. She thought about him every morning at exactly 9:47. The smell of burning rubber, the screech of metal, the darkness creeping in until those gray eyes and that steady voice told her not to close her own. He called her by name, promised to get her out, and when he did, he vanished like he'd never existed. No name. No number. Just gone. So she did what only someone like Rebecca could: build an empire from scratch, sold companies for millions before turning 25, went public and cracked 9 figures before 30. But no matter how high she climbed, the void was there, shaped exactly like those gray eyes. Days came and went: executives, politicians, athletes, artists, none of them fit. She even kept a private investigator on permanent retainer, chasing shadows without a single lead. It wasn't about romance, not really. It was about closure, about the feeling that someone out there had seen her at her weakest and decided she was worth saving, and she needed to know who. 3 years ago, she decided enough was enough. She poured $50 million into finding him. Thomas Crawford, ex-FBI, built a search team with tech and access that could find a missing president if it came to it. They combed military records, rescue reports, and ran facial recognition on hundreds of thousands of photos. They found nothing except hints that whoever he was, he didn't want to be found. Some files were sealed, other databases locked tight. They even ran into signs of counter-surveillance, the kind of thing only people with serious government training could pull off. The break came from a retired fire chief who remembered an unofficial responder the night of the derailment: a young guy in fatigues, tall, lean, gray-eyed, refusing to give his name. That was all Rebecca needed to double down. What she didn't know was that the man she was chasing was already closer than any search could get. Marcus Garrett, though that wasn't his real name, not anymore, had been cleaning her offices for over 3 years, blending into the background like just another invisible part of the building's machinery. In reality, he was her shadow, her bodyguard, her shield. 15 years of covert ops had taught him that the best way to protect someone was to disappear right in front of them. He'd been 20 the night he saved her, a National Guard trainee heading home from a drill when he heard the call. The chaos was burned into him: sparks, leaking fuel, screams, and then her face, terrified but trusting, asking him to remember her name. He did. He never forgot, but life after that wasn't simple. An investigation into why he'd been there turned ugly. Her family was powerful, connected to defense contracts, and paranoia was their native language. Marcus learned the hard way that in certain circles, even saving a life could be spun as suspicious. So he vanished into active duty Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, specializing in pulling people out of hell. Eventually, the military let him go, and private security firms picked him up for the kind of protection work that didn't make headlines but paid very well. When her board hired his firm after a string of threats, Marcus saw her name and asked for the assignment. For 3 years, he kept her safe from everything she didn't even know was coming: foreign spies, organized crime, even an inside hire with mob ties. But her $50 million search, that was a problem. The more she dug, the more dangerous it got. Every move she made lit her up on radars she didn't know existed: corporate blackmailers, foreign intelligence, extortion networks. His orders were clear: shut down her search, or shut her down. Marcus chose a third option. He revealed himself carefully. An elevator chance meeting, a false name, just enough detail to stir the memory without giving away the rest. But Rebecca wasn't the type to let a mystery breathe. She pressed, and within hours, her team discovered the name was fake. When they came looking, he was already gone. Then came the message: parking garage. Level B3. Come along. She did. And there he was, not the janitor, not the stranger from the wreckage, but the man who'd been both. He laid it all out: his real work, why he stayed hidden, how her search had made them both targets. And then he gave her a choice: disappear with him for 6 months while his people cleaned up the mess, or go back to her life and never see him again. It wasn't much of a choice. She powered off her phone, slid into his car, and let him drive north, to a safe house in Vermont. No signal, no surveillance, just time. Time to strip away the myths, to see each other for who they really were without the walls of duty or obsession between them. For Rebecca, it meant facing the truth that she hadn't just been chasing a savior all these years. She'd been chasing a connection that had started in blood and steel and never let go. For Marcus, it was finally stepping out of the shadows for someone who, against all odds, still trusted him with her life. Somewhere down that dark stretch of highway, she realized the $50 million hadn't bought her a man, it had bought her a chance. Not redemption, not a fairy tale, but something harder and maybe better: the courage to stop searching and start choosing. And that's where I'll leave you two people driving into the night, toward a future you can't put a price on, toward something that could either save them or destroy them. You tell me, was she right to go with him? Or did she just trade one kind of danger for another? Because that, my friend, is the kind of ending you can only decide for yourself. They got to the safe house just before sunrise, a small timber cabin tucked so far into the Vermont woods that the road to it barely existed, more a memory of a road than an actual one. No neighbors, no phone lines, no cameras, no chance of someone just happening by. Marcus moved like he'd done this 100 times before, checking doors, windows, power lines, water supply, like the trees themselves might be hostile if you weren't careful. Rebecca stood there in the doorway, breathing air so clean it felt almost wrong after years of climate-controlled boardrooms. And for the first time, she wasn't thinking about her company's stock price, or the contracts on her desk, or the search teams she'd burned millions funding. She was thinking about how this man, this janitor, this ghost, this soldier had built a life around being invisible. And how, for the next 6 months, she'd be the only person in the world who could actually see him. The first days were strange. He cooked simple meals, but precise, like a soldier's field kit adapted for civilian life. He talked little, but when he did, it was never small talk. And she learned quickly that Marcus didn't just watch the perimeter, he watched her. Not in a creepy way, but in a way that made her realize he'd memorized her breathing patterns, the way her shoulders tensed when she was lying, the faint hitch in her voice when something scared her. You know what I mean. Let's not lie. Let's training. And yet, maybe it was both. On the 5th night, the quiet broke. She woke to find Marcus sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of unmarked envelopes spread out like a deck of cards. Each one had a name, an address, a photo, faces of people she'd never met. He told her, calm as ever, that these were the ones who had flagged her search, the ones who would have used it against her. He said in 6 months, every single one of them would be off the board. She didn't ask how, maybe because she didn't want the answer. But here's the twist: one of the envelopes had a face she did recognize. Not from business, not from politics, but from her own inner circle. Margaret. Her assistant of nearly a decade. The woman who had stayed late to manage crises, who had brought her coffee before dawn on the worst mornings, who had cried with her after her mother died. Rebecca's first instinct was to push the envelope away, to say it was a mistake. Marcus just looked at her with those storm gray eyes and said, She's been feeding your calendar to a corporate intelligence broker for over a year. I can prove it. And then he did emails, payment records, even photographs of Margaret meeting with people Rebecca didn't recognize. That's when the Vermont cabin stopped feeling like a retreat and started feeling like a quarantine. Because if someone like Margaret had been compromised, how many more could there be? And if Marcus had known about this for months, what else had he decided she didn't need to know? By the second week, the dynamic between them had shifted. They still cooked together, still walked the perimeter at dusk, still shared coffee on the porch in the mornings, but the air between them was thicker. She asked more questions. He answered less. And yet, the pull was still there, maybe stronger now because danger wasn't just out there, it was woven into her life back home. One night, after too much whiskey and not enough sleep, she told him the thing she hadn't told anyone, not even Crawford, not even her therapist. That deep down, part of her hadn't been searching for a savior. She'd been searching for proof that the moment she thought her life had value wasn't just in her head. That she hadn't imagined the way he looked at her that night in the wreckage. Marcus didn't say a word. Just reached across the table, took her hand, and held it like a promise he didn't quite know how to make. But here's where the story takes a turn you won't like. On the 20th day, a car appeared on the old road, dark SUV, no plates, moving slow. Marcus had sensors buried along the tree line. He knew the second they breached the perimeter. He told her to get into the basement safe room, no arguments. She didn't. She stayed at the window and watched as he stepped into the yard, weapon in hand, body loose but ready. The SUV stopped 50 yards from the cabin. A man got out, suit, gloves, mirrored sunglasses, and called Marcus by a name Rebecca had never heard. Marcus froze for just a beat, then walked forward. They talked for maybe 30 seconds before Marcus handed over one of the envelopes from the kitchen table. The man got back in the SUV and drove off. No threat. No violence. Just an exchange. That night, Rebecca asked what was in the envelope. Marcus said it was off mission. She asked again. He said, don't. And that was the end of it. Or it should have been. But once you spend 18 years chasing the truth, you don't stop just because someone tells you to. And that's where I'm going to leave you for now. Two people locked in a cabin, bound by trust and lies in equal measure, with enemies on every side, and maybe one standing in the kitchen making her morning coffee. So you tell me, if you were Rebecca, would you still believe the man who saved your life is the one who's going to keep it safe? Or is he just the one who gets to decide how and when it ends?